that a lot of times when I'm sitting down with a couple and we're just talking about life, we're talking about inflation and expenses, things that are important, and I will ask the husband, I will say, what's going to happen if you die first? Oh, she'll be fine. Her life will change. Her expenses will decrease.
Half the person, half the expenses.
Exactly. It is not that way, though.
Mastering Your Money. Ways to maximize your income.
Hello, I'm Joshua Melberg, and welcome to Mastering Your Money, the show each week where we explore strategies that can add security and enjoyment to your retirement. Today's show is devoted to an important topic, retirement planning for women. Since women tend to live longer than men, they are in greater danger of outliving their savings. This is a major reason why poverty rates among elderly women are so much higher than they are for men. So today, we'll talk both about the challenges and some strategies to help deal with obstacles women can face in retirement. To help us today, we have a special guest, Stephanie Fullerton. Stephanie is not only one of the most respected financial professionals in the country, but she's also very passionate about helping women plan for more security in retirement. Welcome to the show, Stephanie. I'm so happy to have you. I've known you for many years, and I truly know you care about the people you talk to every single day. And I think there's a big difference when you look at planning for women and helping them get to the successful retirement than it is just for men or couples, because women live so much longer.
It's interesting. We are living longer. We're taking care of ourselves, just as men are. I'm not saying that, but we are living longer. And so I want to make sure that women are equipped. I'm very passionate about it, and I think it really began when my father-in-law passed away. Several years ago, before I was even working with women, I had had a great conversation with my father-in-law in a September sitting down at dinner and asked him, if something happened to you, what do we need to know? How do we make sure that mom is taken care of? And it was interesting because those were the days where you didn't ask men.
Right.
And men didn't share with their wives really what was going on inside of their portfolios and part of their plan.
It almost could have felt like you're challenging what he's doing or what he's done. I've already taken care of her.
Exactly. That and being nosy, the nosy daughter-in-law.
Sure.
But I took the bite out of the bullet, and I went ahead and I asked them, because for some reason it was stirring in me, what would happen. Had no reason to think that anything would happen. Thankfully, I did, because it was only 2 months later, my father passed away with a heart attack, died instantly. And so I became very passionate about helping my mother-in-law, because here's what happened. Josh, you're right. She has lived 15 years later. She's still going strong. Her Social Security cut in half. Her pension cut in half. And here she was, early 60, having to figure out, do I need to go back to work to make ends meet? Not to mention inflation.
That's scary.
Yes.
I mean, that's scary. Your loved one passes away, you're frozen, and then life changes, and the paycheck just cuts in half. And
what do you do?
What do you do? Who do you go to? And then they say you're not supposed to make any major decisions for 6 months to a year, yet life just changed around you.
Your income changed. Your way that you live has changed, and there's so many things you're dealing with emotionally. The last thing that she needed to be dealing with is financial decisions. So I was thankful that I had taken the time and kind of gone with that instinct inside my heart that says, dig a little bit, where everybody else was kind of afraid to ask.
That's tough. That's
Yes.
really tough, especially when you have family. I have family. And digging where your nose is not supposed to be along, and people can get offensive, or they can feel challenged as far as like, well, I've already taken care of her, or everything's okay. And it might be okay as long as I'm breathing. But what happens when there's a time? And so whatever happened with your mother in this case?
So again, her Social Security dropped in half. I mean, she got her husband's because it was more than hers, and her pension cut in half. And so we were able to make sure, thankfully her house had been paid off. I think it's really important. You probably agree. Being debt-free is so important. And I encourage women, as they even come into my office, be debt-free. Get rid of those things that maybe could create or suffocate out your lifestyle. So she was debt-free. We created some income planning strategies that were able to give her some peace of mind to know that as inflation happens, as her lifestyle changes, that we were going to be able to have some permanent income there for her.
And Stephanie, this is very common where women live longer, right? The
Yes.
studies show that you almost have a 25% chance if you're a woman to live to up to age 95. And women typically live 2 or 3 years longer than males. And then they're typically younger than the husband, and they're the caretakers. So who's going to take care of her? And that's why it's so important. I mean, just take Social Security as an example. This is such a great asset that can be maximized, and a lot of people leave that on the table. And when you turn on Social Security, you can't just look at it as an individual. You got to look at it not only as a couple, but also as, hey, is my loved one taken care of? It reminds me of a friend of mine that I was talking to, and he did not want to make any changes, and he did not want to maximize Social Security, didn't want to take a joint pension so the pension didn't drop.
Right.
So I convinced him, because he's a friend, to play a little game called Let's See the Future Now. And Let's See the Future Now simply meant, okay, I know you're used to spending $6,000 a month. We know mathematically when you die, your income's going to drop down to $3,500 a month. So from this point forward, this is all you're spending.
Right.
Well, guess what happened? 3 weeks later, they're saying, okay, we're going to make some changes more for her versus him. And I think that's so important. So how do you bring that up to women you talk to? How do you bring that up to the couple when you talk to them?
I think you just said the right thing. Let's play a game. What does happen? It is interesting, Josh, you say it, that a lot of times when I'm sitting down with a couple and we're just talking about life, we're talking about inflation and expenses, things that are important, and I will ask the husband, I will say, what's going to happen if you die first? Oh, she'll be fine. Her life will change. Her expenses will decrease.
Half the person, half the expenses.
Exactly. It is not that way, though. It was not that way for my mother-in-law. I mean, she still had inflation. She still had taxes. There were things that, yeah, she fed a little less, one little mouth, but she started going out with friends,
right,
her girlfriends, to movies, to lunches. And so it is important to say, okay, what if you did pass away? How do you have your wife taken care of? Or, and maybe it's not the wife, let's face it. Sometimes the man can live longer. A lot of times we do all the planning for the wife to live longer, and she dies first. So it's all about looking at the what ifs. What are you going to lose, and how are you going to replace that?
A lot of times no one wants to think about death, and it will happen. Whether it's the husband dying first or the wife dying first, it's 100% guarantee it's going to happen at some point. And therefore that conversation is never talked about, and because I don't want to think about it, I actually don't put things in place. But I got to tell you, some of the husbands I've spoken to that made sure they maximized their pension benefits with their employers for the spouse. They made sure that he, the greater the two Social Securities, like Stephanie said, goes to the surviving spouse. That's a big deal when you decide when you want to turn on. And the thought process, at first, they were like, I'm getting less, and that's probably not going to happen. And they have all these reasons, maybe I'm more healthy or less, and I'm going to die early. I don't know. But when they actually took those actions to make sure that his wife was taken care of, maxing out the Social Security, maxing out the pensions, making sure there's money set aside that wasn't in the volatile market, it almost was like a proud peace of mind for him, saying, you know what? If something did happen to me tomorrow, I took care of her, and that's my way of saying I love you, which is very powerful for people out there. But I think a lot of the issues is it's hard to have that difficult conversation. No one wants to talk about it. No. It's the elephant in the room.
Well, and also, not only it gives him like this pride and peace of mind, but what he doesn't realize is that wife that's sitting next to him probably has wanted to talk about this for a lot of years, and she's been scared to, for whatever reason. Maybe it's just the comfort of knowing he's got it taken care of.
Yeah.
Or maybe I don't want to ask him questions because he's going to think that I'm challenging him in that. But really what that gentleman has just done, what that husband has just done, not only he's given him this honor of, I've taken care of my wife because I love her, but she sleeps so much better at night, knowing that if he does pass away, my lifestyle is going to maintain. And that's key.
So for those women watching out there that have that significant other, that married loved one, what would you tell them to do, how to have that difficult conversation and saying, hey, can we talk about finances? Can we talk about incomes? And maybe they didn't plan for it and it's kind of, they don't want to talk about it because we'll get there and it's a hard conversation. What would you tell them to do? Watch the show?
Yeah, watch the show. Gently nudge them.
Okay.
I think there's a way, even with my husband, there's a way that I can ask him for something and I can get it, but if I asked him for the same thing in a different tone or a different way, it might be, no. So I think it's just about being gentle about it. Explain to your husband, I just want to be educated. What if something were to happen? I need to know to make sure that I'm getting every dime that you've worked hard for.
Yeah.
I don't want to forget about something. And I think it's good to bring a third party in. Have someone that's expert in that area to sit down with them to make sure that what if this is what will happen and how are we going to make sure that this is taken care of. And it's not necessarily saying I want to take over. It's I just want to know what to do when I need to take over.
Got it. So that's a big difference. It's basically a version of saying what happens if I have to versus I'm taking over. Have you ever had a situation where something happened and the husband's like, I got it taken care of. I trust my advisor. We know everything's going to be just fine. And then what happened?
Danger. Josh, I think of a sweet lady that I work with. I've been helping her for 4 years now. Back in 2000, she inherited over a $1.5 million IRA.
Wow.
Now, most people would say she has nothing to worry about.
Sure.
She was 70 years old.
Okay.
Plenty of money. And I know the first 10 years of the stock market, crazy.
Yeah.
Craziness.
Way up, way down.
Volatility. Even at the end of 2009, there were no positive returns. They call it a lost decade, in fact, when you go back and look at that. And her main objective, and it makes me sad to think that there are people out there that do this to, especially widows. They take advantage. This 1.5 million plus, her main objective, Josh, was just to take, that minimum distribution at 70.5 you have to take.
You got to take just under 4% out.
Yes.
And then that number goes up.
Each year it goes up, it gets higher, but you are required. You have to take it. She didn't want to take it. In fact, she wanted to be able to leave that to her children, but she had to. So through those first 9 years of seeing that market, like you say, go like a roller coaster, she simply would pick up the phone and ask her advisor. Now, this isn't the advisor that her husband had the relationship with.
So probably many years, and they were on the same philosophy. And,
yes.
And might have been a different philosophy than she did.
I would venture to say it was even more about a growth accumulation because he was still working.
So the husband was still working, and his mindset was accumulate and grow versus keep what I have.
Preserve, right.
Okay.
Yeah. And through these 10 years, she would call her advisor. Here's what he would say to her, Josh. Why do you even question me? Your husband always trusted me. Can't you trust me and do the same? Yet she was seeing her $1.6 million in the market, 95% of it, go down and down. Go down and down. It went all the way down to just a little over $500,000 in just a matter of 9 years. Yes, it did go down some because she had to take out those minimum distributions, but that was so not significant compared to what she lost. Do you know the only reason why I talked to her is because her advisor had told her that had sent her a letter that he had misunderstood some fees and he was incorrect and he needed to make a fee change. And he was going to charge her an additional $17,000.
On top of all of that loss, all of that. Okay.
Not being on the same page. Perhaps if she had been more involved with her husband and with that advisor, that would not have happened.
Because then being on the same page of what the purpose of the money was for, which really was how can I keep it, not lose it, I don't need, and just
accumulate, preserve it, protect it, pass it on to the beneficiaries. So, yeah, I can tell you story after story that I've seen especially widows and single women that get taken advantage because they're looked at, maybe they're not as educated or not as smart about the finances as maybe the spouse was.
So for the women out there today that, are still, they're married and they have a spouse and maybe they have money separated, because sometimes the women are in control of the money, or they have their own money that they're being managed and they each have their own strategy. What kind of advice would you give to, if you have husband and wife sitting here taking care of her, and then what kind of advice if it's just her, saying what are some things you can do, like maxing out your Social Security, look at the pensions. What's the baseline so they have that greater peace of mind? Life isn't going to cut in half of income. Expenses are going to go when something happens.
Yeah. You and I both know there's over 400 plus ways to select Social Security. The average person does not know that they have that many ways to figure out how to maximize, I call it getting every penny and nickel out of Social Security that you rightfully deserved. You've paid into it.
Right.
Social Security is going to give you a few options, and if you want it young, you're going to take less. If you want it older, you're going to get more. But there's a strategy to it. There are ways to maximize it. So the number one thing that I'm going to say is make sure we're maximizing Social Security customized to your needs, because everybody's different.
And that's key, because you can customize it for the husband, or when you want to retire, or you can also customize it to the wife, because a lot of times their Social Security is much lower, the husband's will be much higher, and there's a huge benefit if you let his continue to grow, even if they file suspend. And it might be a little bit less money at the beginning, not forever.
Right.
But now you got a permanent income number for your spouse that's guaranteed to increase with cost of living adjustment. And do you want that number to be a lower number because you just rushed in and collect it, or you just let it happen, then maximize it for the surviving spouse? Or do you want it to increase on a higher number?
You want it to keep increasing, and you want to make sure it's keeping up with inflation. And so again, that's why the importance of making sure that it's customized to what your needs are is very important. And that is why we take and look at everyone individually to make sure they're going to maximize that Social Security. Because I believe I'd rather see them start out smaller and grow to where that number's getting bigger and keeping up with inflation. Just like my mother-in-law.
Sure.
15 years ago, her expenses were a lot less than they are now. Not necessarily because she's spending more money, but her expenses have grown because of inflation.
Cost of living gets up.
Yes.
You don't necessarily see it, but you feel it, especially if your paycheck stays the same. So what about the women that are divorced? What can they do?
Just what my mom did. My mom was married for 20 plus years. The rules are you got to be married at least 10 plus years before you're divorced. So maybe if you're thinking about divorce and you're at 9 months or 9 years and 9 months, wait to 10 years, because that's really important. Because if you're divorced, it doesn't even affect your ex-husband. They don't even know. In fact, my dad is the one that called me and said to me, Stephanie, I was just at the Social Security department, and your mom needs to come down and collect my Social Security because she can. Higher amount.
And he knew that.
He knew that. And so I'm like, you're right. And so I called my mom up on the phone and said, get down there now. Why? Because his Social Security was more than her Social Security.
Isn't that an interesting strategy? You can have a husband that's married, but his ex-spouse is collecting benefits off of his Social Security, and so his current spouse. But that could be a much bigger paycheck for the ex-spouse than if she just collected herself. And if she doesn't know the right questions to ask, that's a big difference in life in the future.
You better believe it. And Social Security, and not to beat up on them because I'm not, but when you go down to the offices, they're just there to have you fill out the paperwork, not to go in depth with you. So, if you have been divorced, were married at least 10 years, that's what I'm saying. By all means, if I don't hate the word divorce, but if that's happening, at least wait to 10 years so you could possibly benefit from the higher Social Security.
Then after 10 years, you could almost say it's almost suggested that there's an incentive to get a divorce since both people can collect on one paycheck. No, you don't want to do that for that reason.
No, we'll have to do another show about that. No.
Good. Well, what else can women do to help put things in place, not just from a financial standpoint, but for peace of mind, meaning like they know what to do to where they don't have to make any radical decisions, they don't have to move out of their house, they're not frantic. What kind of planning of just like putting things away and they have kind of a checklist, what do you typically suggest?
I like to see at least a couple $100,000 just set aside for health issues. What if they get sick, or and there's a good chance that they are as they get older? What if they need nursing home? I think it's important to even have directives. It amazes me, Josh, how many people out there have not even looked at having a trust, putting things in place so when something does happen, that it's being distributed according to how you want it to be distributed, not somebody else. Making sure that you've got enough money set aside for health issues, making sure that you've got enough permanent income to replace what if the pension decreases, what if Social Security increases. And these are big what ifs.
And people think getting like a, let's say just a basic revocable living trust, they think it's outrageously expensive, they think it's complicated. They've been around for a long time, and I'm sure there's attorneys that are fairly low cost, but just the stress relief of making it easy and less friction, and just making sure I know exactly what to do. I have a plan. There's a pour over will. There's a power of attorney if needed. Maybe some of the things that it's not even needed, but just having it in writing. A lot of people don't have that in writing. And what you're doing is you're making a less stress, less friction for your loved ones.
Yeah, I was working with a couple once. It was, I almost felt like I had to get up and walk away because it was kind of getting heated. We were talking about a trust, and she goes, well, we haven't done it yet. And I said, well, why wouldn't you have done it yet? I mean, these are important matters. And she pointed at her husband, and she says, because he hasn't decided how much his kids are going to get and how much I'm going to get. It was a second marriage. Okay? That's important. But what concerned me, if they didn't put something in place, and they did after we had a long discussion, but what concerned me is, what if they hadn't put anything into place and he does proceed before her? Will the children say rightfully all of it's theirs? Will they contest it? So, yeah, I mean, it's important to make sure that you know how things are going to be distributed and that they're in writing and that they can't be contested and they do avoid probate.
That is key. That is key.
Yes.
And I like what you said about, maybe having money set aside to take care of home health care or long-term care, because I forget what the exact stats are, but it's almost 3 times the amount more women in assisted living, home health care, long-term care than the men. And part of the reasons is because they are the caretakers. They're the ones that are taking care of him. And then who's going to take care of her? And that's why it's so key, because it takes that stress away when you know that there's things in place to have those bills to take care of when that health care gets expensive.
Right, and women are living longer. And you're right, they usually are the caretakers, and they are usually typically the ones. And I think I read the study was like over 75% of women do end up needing some type of care, whether it's nursing home or home care.
So from a tax perspective, any things that they should look at?
Well, there's a lot of things that you can look at when it comes to taxes, because I think you and I both agree we're just going to continue to pay more taxes.
It's all going to go up. So
it's only going to go up. And, you want to maximize in your estate. You want to make it tax efficient. Maybe you're like the Carol that I was speaking about that was getting these distributions that she didn't need. Well, one great thing that she did is we began putting it into a life insurance that really allowed her to make her estate tax efficient. When she dies, it passes on tax-free. So a lot of ways to look at taxes, be prepared for them. Just because you're retiring doesn't mean you're going to pay less taxes. You have a big tax bomb. It's called an IRA.
That's a killer.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie.
You're
A lot
welcome.
of wisdom there. If you or the viewers out there, you're married, you're a woman watching this, take some time, look at your income future needs, look at both spouses, and be tax-wise and maximize those benefits for her. We'll be right back. And here's some final thoughts. Because women tend to live longer than men, they're in greater danger of outliving their savings. Here are a few things that you can do to help prevent this from happening to you or someone that you love. First, if you're married and have not yet started Social Security, it is important for both of you to maximize your spousal benefits. This can also optimize the Social Security for the survivor and the benefit that the one that will receive the income in the future. Second, if you're divorced, know your rights. Ex-spouses, with regards to collecting Social Security spousal benefits, every year more than $10 billion in spousal benefits goes unclaimed because people aren't aware of what they're entitled to. Third, whether you're single, divorced, married, widowed, make sure you have a financial plan designed to provide you permanent income for life as long as you live. Income is the key, but remember, it's all about the net of fees, net of taxes, and net of inflation. Master these and you have more fun, more time, and more money. I wish you success, and I'll see you next time. Now go and master your money.